Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the This Is Gonna Hurt podcast with J. Gordon Duncan. And if you're wondering why the J, the answer is, I'm not a bagpipe player. And if that joke doesn't make any sense, I encourage you to check out episode 0, where I explain that joke, as well as the purpose of the This Is Gonna Hurt podcast, where we talk about faith, family, fitness, finances, and sometimes fun. Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the This Is Gonna Hurt podcast with J. Gordon Duncan. And if you're wondering why the J, the answer is, I'm not a bagpipe player. And I haven't said that in a while. I know it's in the pre-show, but I had to explain the other day why I go by J. Gordon Duncan online. I by no means do that in person. But the world's foremost bagpipe player is Gordon Duncan. And so online, I have to battle to see who owns Gordon Duncan on Twitter, Facebook, everywhere else. I got it on Twitter with that blue check for me, but there are other places that I don't have it. Like, for example, his estate owns GordonDuncan.com, and I had to buy JGordonDuncan.com. But all good. Guys, welcome so much to the show. Thank you as always. Last week was fun. I got to share with you 3 brand new social media platforms, relatively new, and they were Be Real, Telegram, and Swell. And so I'm looking forward to seeing who of you, and which of these you guys tackle, because as I share with them and how we're using, some folks go, well, Be Real doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, hey, I get it. It doesn't, but it's fun. And then also some folks are like, give me, I'm ready to expand onto new platforms. So as always, guys, thank you so much. I'm back in the studio again. Great to be here. Voice is getting stronger. 3rd or 4th week in a row, you've listened to me with a less than perfect voice, but that's all right. I'm glad to be here. Really today I wanted to do a quick overview of some of the books I'm reading. I'm constantly either reading with a book in my hand, listening to an audiobook, or finding a book on like the Libby app. Libby is an app you can download, put in your library card, and listen to free audiobooks. Check that out if you haven't ever done it. And then sometimes you can just find full audiobooks on podcasts. Like there'll be like a 7-hour podcast that's nothing for the audiobook. So a lot of times when I want to listen to a book, before I go to Audible and buy it, I'll go to Spotify and I will search podcasts to see if the whole book is there. Sometimes it is there because the book's in the public domain. Sometimes the author has shared the entire book as a free podcast, and sometimes it's there and I have no idea how it got there. But I do that a lot, and I'm either reading with a book in my hand, listening to it in Audible, or listening to it through Libby or a podcast. And last year, I either read or listened to 46 books. And a lot of that I get to do when I'm out running or driving around in the car. I listen to a ton of books in the car as well. But since podcasts, just regular short and long form podcasts, compete for that time, 46 was all I could get. I wanted to get in 50 books, but I just didn't get it. So, but because of this, and I listen to everything at 1.5 speed, I get to go through a lot of books, and I love it. And so anything that's about business, anything that's about running, anything that's about improvement or the mind and body, I'm going to listen to. And you know what? I start listening to books that I know I'm going to disagree with. Lately, I've been like, that's okay. This person's, they're quote-unquote expert in that field. They've had some measure of success. I don't mind listening to this book. I can figure out what's right and wrong, but I might find a nugget from it. And so this year, I've gone into some new realms and listened to some stuff that was kind of out there. And I can't wait to share it with you. But some of them have been fantastic, and I found some that are really enjoyable. So I'm not going to go through the 46 from last year. That would be ridiculous. But let me see where we're at so far in 2023. So far this year, I've listened to about 13 books. So I'm on pace, again, right there with that 46, 48 for the year. But I want to share with you I'm going to give you quick reviews, quick recommendations, and I can't put the links for every one of these in the show notes, but I will tell you where I found them, and I'll tell you whether they were free or whether I had to pay for them, and then that way you can make your choice from there. But my January started out with finishing a book that I started in December, and then I went through some of my normal January reading. There's a couple of books I listen to every January, and then I get going. Now, the book I finished first in January was one I started in December, and it's a lesser-known book by Napoleon Hill called Outwitting the Devil. Now, I bought a hard copy of this a few years ago, read half of it and stopped it, but I came back to it. This book really was re-recommended by Russell Brunson of ClickFunnels. Now, Napoleon Hill is, of course, famous for Think and Grow Rich. That book has been a foundational business book for so many people for the last 75 or so years. You may or may not like it. It's got a lot to do with the law of attraction or the New Thought movement and that kind of thing. But at its heart, there's typically some nuggets you can take away from Napoleon Hill. And Outwitting the Devil is, the premise of it is that the devil is on trial and Napoleon Hill is asking him questions and the devil has to answer them, but it's primarily asking questions around business and success. Now, this is not a new premise. If any of you have read C.S. Lewis and read his Screw Tape letters, that's a letter about the devil writing to a minion about how he entraps the minds of people. And it's been a very famous book in Christianity and in English circles. And I've read Screw Tape letters a couple of times. So it looks like Napoleon Hill looked at that and said, well, let me write that same book, but let's do it in a slightly different format for business. And I'll tell you what, listening to it, I enjoyed it a lot more than reading it, because one of the premises in there is that one of the things that keeps people back from success is drifting. And drifting is the idea of not having a great focus and just kind of drifting on and doing the same thing every day. Not goal-oriented, not growth-oriented, just kind of living day in and day out. And in Outwitting the Devil, he talks about that's what gets most people. They just kind of drift. They don't take control or action of their lives. So I would recommend Outwitting the Devil if you want to think about mindset in the business or success space. Now, every year I listen to 2 books by Grant Cardone. I have this, there's this, I go back and forth on Grant Cardone with his personality and his background and so many other things. But he's written a couple of good books. Every year in January, I listen to the 10X Rule. The 10X Rule is not a time management book. It's a how much can you succeed and accomplish with the time you have. And the 10X Rule does a great job of challenging the reader, like, hey, you can actually accomplish more in the amount of time you have. You don't need 36 hours in the day. You can quantify what you want and go after it within the time you have, and you can find a lot of time you waste. I typically listen to the 10X Rule in January and July because it's very motivating for me to keep me on track. And simultaneously, I listen to If You're Not First, You're Last, and Be Obsessed or Be Average by Grant Cardone. Both the same concept. Be obsessed or be average is, are you absolutely committed to your goals? If you're not going to meet them. You're going to fall into average. And if you're not first, you're last, it's the same idea. His themes are very similar. In all of those books, the Outwitting the Devil, If You're Not First, You're Last, 10X Rule, Be Obsessed or Be Average, I found them all free on Spotify. So if you'll just type the names of those books into Spotify podcast, you will find them absolutely for free. You can listen to the entire things there for free. And again, the 3 by Grant Cardone, 10X Rule is very much, I recommend that first for anybody in their first interaction. Listen, Cardone's got his personality, a lot of ego there, but I think 10X Rule does a great job of saying you can accomplish more than you think. And then If You're Not First, You're Last, or Be Obsessed or Be Average are very similar books. If you had to choose between one of them, I would say go with either your first or last. If you're not first, you're last. That just again, if you're not pushing to succeed, then you're going backwards. That kind of concept. And then I finished one other book in January called Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. Forgive me if I mispronounced that. And I bought that on Audible. It took me a little while to get through it. It was a little clunky. But the idea is setting the groundwork for the closing of sales, the agreement between 2 people. It's not manipulative, but it is, here are some of the common characteristics when 2 people are coming to an agreement, and how do you set the groundwork for that. So in sales, that's really, really important. Persuasion is moving people in that direction so that you can come to a mutually beneficial agreement. And that book's called Persuasion, and that one I paid for on Audible. Let me grab a sip of tea here. So that was my January. Now, as what happens to me every year, I come out of the gates in January. This year it was 5. I think last year it was 7. And I listen. And then I get to February and I'm like, whoa, my brain needs to take a break. I'll listen to music or podcasts for a month. I'm going to slow down on the books. So there were only 3 books in February. I returned to High Performance Habits by Brendon Burchard, which I found free on Spotify. Just type High Performance Habits in there. He has published this free chapter by chapter. So each chapter is its own podcast episode. And I say this book had a huge impact on me. I believe it was 2017. And what he did is he looked at the high performers, hundreds of them, and said, what are the common characteristics that help them succeed? And then he goes through each one of them. I believe there are 10 or 11. And then he gives you like, hey, this is the common characteristic of a person who has had great success, all areas, financial, sports, you name it. And then he goes, and this is what they had to say. So it's a wonderfully nice sequential book. Here's a characteristic. Here are people who have promoted this and succeeded with it and what they had to say. And it's a wonderful beginning to end book. And I relate to Brendon because he had a brain injury, and it helps me relate to anybody who's had a brain injury and had to come back. And so I recommend High Performance Habits a ton. If you want it in hardback, you might be able to find a free copy. If you just type in High Performance Habits, free copy online, you can probably find a funnel where he's giving it for free, and you just have to pay for shipping. But he himself publishes that on the Brendon Burchard podcast, chapter by chapter. So great book. It's foundational if you kind of want to ease your way into some of this thought, success, achievement type field. Then I listened to Y-O-U, like U-O-U, by Pastor Eric Thomas. Now, this was a book that I listened to on the Libby app. That means through the public library. So I waited a long time for this. This book came out in 2022, and I had to get on a wait list. And when it popped up, I just grabbed it. I listened to it in like 3 or 4 days. And he shares his amazing story about where he came from, going into ministry, and then now how he's become a coach to tons of people. Everything from within his ministry to actors to athletes. Very inspirational. And he shares this story about when he moved into the public speaking realm. And by his own admission, he has a distinct style. He's not wearing suits. He likes to wear what he wants to wear. And he was invited to speak at a corporation, and I think the fee was $10,000. And they were, wow, like, you can come, and we'd like you to come in and speak to us for $10,000. However, we want you to wear a suit. And he said, I'm not wearing a suit. I'm going to be me. And they're like, well, if you don't wear a suit, you can't come. And he turned it down. And his argument was, if I came to speak to a baseball team, you're not going to ask me to dress up like a baseball player. If you came and asked me to speak to a football team, you're not going to ask me to put on football clothes and a helmet. Just let me be me. And initially, right after that, he got a gig for the same cost, and they didn't care what he had to wear. And he was saying, listen, stick by your principles and your characteristics. It wasn't really about what you wear. It was about, as you grow into the field you want, make sure who you are is how you're growing. And I thought that was an incredibly important point. You want to make sure this is who I am, these are my values, this is my characteristic, and I'm going to grow in a way that I don't have to compromise that. A lot of other great stories in there. It moves more into the coaching realm towards the back third. First 2/3 were really his story kind of woven in. But You by Eric Thomas, really great. I posted it as an Instagram story and tagged it, and he even sent me a personal thank you, which I thought was pretty cool. On Spotify, type in The Champion's Mind, and I'm afraid, I feel so bad, I don't have the author's name there. The Champion's Mind is very similar to High Performance Habits, but is focusing on interviewing champions in their field and common characteristics. I would say it's very similar to High Performance Habits, but is a little bit more easy listening. Very similar. You can get it on Spotify. Just type in The Champion's Mind. But that was all I did in February. Those 3 books, High Performance Habits, UOU, and The Champion's Mind. Well, March has been huge. In fact, March is not over, and I'm already, 6 or 7 books in. That's because I went on vacation and finished 4 books on vacation. So I want to share with you, here's where I got into some books. Now, The first thing was Miracle Morning by Hal Axelrod. I believe I found that free on Spotify. And I know you can get it on Audible. And I've read so many Miracle Mornings, Millionaire Mornings. I mean, I know that Lewis Howes put out a small book along these lines. I know Ed Milet did. There's a lot of folks who talk about optimizing your morning. And I feel like I have a very optimized morning myself. But something about the appeal, I like Hal Axelrod, really good. And he's like, this will transform your life if you approach your mornings in this way. So give that a shot. That's all I got for a review. And then I got to get to Wallace Wattles, Wattles. Let me grab a sip real quick. Now, Wallace Wattles was a Methodist minister who then moved into the New Thought movement and then moved into something called Christian socialism. And I know for immediately some of you guys are just going to throw anything he writes in the trash can at that point in time. But in my reading, I found a lot of people quoting his work. I know he's had influence on a lot of thought leaders, but it's about becoming mentally strong. Now, I'm just going to tell you right now, in this first book, I maybe agree with half of what he has to say, but there's some things in there that are really helpful. The first book I listened to of his, which is free on Spotify, is called The Science of Getting Rich. Now, guys, if there was a science, ABC, guaranteed wealth, I really think more and more people would do it. And he makes that guarantee in the front. If you will do exactly what I tell you, you will get rich. And I've just got to say I can't agree with that because I know people that are wealthy that haven't done this. But it is very much about visualization. For the lack of a better term, there is a lot of law of attraction stuff in there. There's some principles I disagree with about how he views interacting with people in poverty. But I will say what I liked about it was the definitiveness of your goals and then the way you think about them, even in the midst of difficulty. I liked that a lot. So I got to go with The Science of Getting Rich. I also read The Science of Being Great by him, which I thought was garbage. I'm not going to recommend it at all. Your Invisible Power, which is very similar, a thought mind book. Not by him, by Genevieve, and I don't remember her name. Not worth it. And then Ready, Fire, Aim by Michael Masterson, which I thought was phenomenal. That is a comprehensive grow your business book. I paid for that on Audible. And then I just finished Make Your Bed by Admiral William McRaven, which I got from Libby. And that is his famous keynote speech as a Navy SEAL, like starting your day right by making your bed. So gang, that has been this year. That's somewhere around 13 books. If you want to know any more about those books, reach out to me. Keep reading and listening. And I can't wait to catch up with you guys soon and talk to you next week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
How do you shorten the time it takes to buy a car? Car buying just got easier. Pohanka365.com lets you complete as much or as little of the car buying process online. Pohanka365.com. Car buying simplified. Anytime, anywhere.
Small business owners, you should be praised for wanting to grow your business. That's a good thing, and not everybody has the guts to do it. As a business owner myself, I know you've overcome obstacles that people don't even know about. Hi, my name is Gordon Duncan, the owner of Capitalized Marketing and Consulting, and I want you to know that if your business hasn't grown like you want it to, it's not your fault. If it's not COVID getting in the way, it's ridiculous things like changing social media algorithms. You're right in thinking that very few people are doing small businesses any favors right now. But Capitalized Marketing and Consulting is here to help. We've created a 90-day course that is guaranteed to grow the revenue of your business. It will give you the tools that you've been looking for. And as a certified coach, I would be with you along the way. If you would like to learn more about our program, just visit CapitalizeYourBest.com and get started enjoying the success you deserve. Again, that's CapitalizeYourBest.com, and I can't wait to celebrate all you accomplish.